Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Prime Minister Mia Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif, MOS Foreign Affairs, Hina Rabbani Khar, Power Minister present with us, many others, Minister Information who made us do this event, Mariam Aurangzeb. Thank you very much, Excellencies. Thank you for joining us today. Apologies for the delay in your evening's festivities, I'm sure. But thank you for making us do this, Prime Minister, and for making us come together today. Before I thank all those that made one of our key agendas at COP27 achievable, allow me to draw a brief sketch of where we stand today in terms of the resilience challenge that countries like Pakistan face. Because resilience, Excellencies, is what holds the key to a sustainable future, for trajectories of growth and economic stability to yield any dividends for public well-being and progress. I will not be repeating the level of risk that Pakistan faces from climate stress and global warming, as you've seen, as we have already been repositioned by climate change as an epicenter of vulnerability. I think globally there's no confusion about that. Our entire post-colonial model of development has been upended like the bridges that fell like toothpicks to the angry waters. You saw a very small postcard from that edge on that video tonight. Our concerted public advocacy on climate stress and where we stand on the business of equitable recovery from climate losses with our own limited carbon footprint is also a well-known global statistic after COP27. For that, I thank all my colleagues here. For a country drowning in both floods and debt, the case for climate justice, for loss and damage, is neither an adversarial litigious process for us, nor is it charity. We are quite clear about that. There is no capacity in countries hit by repeated climate disasters to finance both humanitarian relief and rebuilding with resilience. That is the crux of the problem we face. Business as usual is no longer possible, either at home or as a global partner. The UNFCCC position, as you may have read and seen, including the Secretary General's, on climate justice is also quite clear. It strongly makes the case for countries from the global south to seek a rebalancing of resources from the global north. Why it does that is also obvious. It says that the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities must apply to all in working to achieve joint goals. Now, multilateral systems have no funds of their own. We know that, to draw from. Obviously, they need support from the wealthy and the developed. While that may sound simple, the climate justice model applies an equitable, not equal, distribution of global resources for countries in the front line of global warming, like we are today. Who are the other countries? These are, apart from Pakistan, countries like the small island states who first brought up the agenda of loss and damage 30 years ago. These are, and then there are, of course, the less developed countries and countries from Africa where the suffering from the Horn, from the drought-induced hunger in Somalia is particularly tragic and acute even now as we speak. This involves countries from the Latin American group as well, along with other subnational groups who have historically suffered damages from other countries' emissions. All of us have one thing in common, all these countries. Climate stress is resetting our entire national agendas and capacity to face the 21st century. Do we have that capacity? This is a moot point. To face the 21st century or even this decade with adequate food, water, access to livelihoods with dignity and rights that we take for granted. They are all up in the air. Things are not going to remain stable in many parts of the world if this level of climate stress is not addressed in resilience rebuilding. So while climate vulnerability may be the new normal, we also do not expect climate vulnerability to become a death sentence, because that is what it has become for many all over the world. That is a fact hiding in plain sight, and it is important for us to face this fact. Resilience, ladies and gentlemen, is also a race against time. For many of us, we will not have a full decade, and there is, for instance, the Maldives, who will not have a full decade to face or survive rising sea levels, which is precisely what you see in the south of Pakistan, in Sindh today, where lakes the size of the UK have formed in the aftermath of the catastrophic floods that have left many parts of our country, its topography, and the lives and livelihoods of 33 million people impacted forever. The one piece that is missing, the one thing that can bridge the gap between survival and extinction for many, is the bridge of financing. It is no silver bullet, but it is the difference between subsistence and sustainability. That dilemma is very clear. Every single rupee for rebuilding with resilience, even funds that come via the climate ministry, are regularly repurposed now to service humanitarian needs on the front line, because that is the climate shock the country is sustaining. So many countries like Pakistan now are in a cycle where we are feeding the humanitarian need, we are barely recovering, we have no funds to fight back with resilience or build back with resilience, like we are constantly told, and we have the next disaster. We have the next climate catastrophe. So it is a vicious cycle. It is afflicting many countries, and it is becoming what is known as a new climate normal. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is just not acceptable. As the Prime Minister said, what goes on in Pakistan will not stay in Pakistan is the only certainty, because one ecosystem, when it collapses, takes down another, then another, then another. We can build arcs of privilege for some of ourselves, for others, recede to colder climates, but that is also not sustainable. So clearly, we need a reset. The rest, frankly, is all talk. $30 billion for loss and damages for Pakistan just for this flood are clearly needed. The estimates are not drawn by ourselves. They're drawn by the World Bank and our other partners. 348 billion USD are needed according just to the World Bank's new country climate development report for Pakistan to become resilient and to survive 2030. As you can see, this is a dangerous and decisive decade for us. We will have to take the actions needed, and we will be seeking assistance and support from all those who have come to us as friends, as donors, as sympathizers, and as partners in all our endeavors. Where these amounts will come from is a question that can only be addressed together at different forums. The key word is together. The one thing I do repeat is that strategic drift is not an option. Making no decisions, not coming together to address the problems as a global community is not an option. It poses grave dangers for those of us living on the edge. And we are clearly living on the edge. We are clearly on the ground zero of vulnerability. And as the UN Secretary General says, we cannot sleepwalk into the existential climate crisis anymore, because that is exactly what's going on. Conflicts divide countries, but the climate challenge drove Pakistan to lead this initiative, both formally from the Prime Minister's office and from the Foreign Minister and his group of negotiators working with us day and night. And the climate and civil society teams, such as the moderator Rafi Alam that you saw, who worked with us throughout for no gain, no advantage, but actually stayed on to assist at their own expense whenever the COP was extended, as you know. It was a perfect team effort when the stars aligned, if you like, to bring the loss and damage agenda to its first step on a long journey. I say this is a first step because that is what it is. This is what brought climate vulnerable countries together over long nights of Zoom conferencing with different groups on how we plan to take our business to COP27. I'm very grateful to the Foreign Minister who could not be with us tonight for making sure that it was put on the agenda. Until this particular COP, until Glasgow, loss and damage was a discussion item, never came up on the formal agenda. So it's a particular triumph for Pakistan, but for all the countries that supported us despite being not exactly friends all the time, but worked with us in a spirit of perfect unity and harmony. So thanks goes to them and to our own teams. This is also what we can bring to the table for sorting how to go forward. Right now, it's gone into a transitional committee, which will report back at the next conference. Their work is cut out for them. Climate diplomacy has a unique way of bringing friends, enemies, rivals together in one room, and there is only the hegemony of seeking solutions, which is what worked, like poetry this time. And I really have to say, I won't name any countries here, but suffice it to say, the hope that arose, just the hope that arose from the political will of achieving joint outcomes when it seemed completely, every night it seemed impossible. Then the flurry of bilaterals, the messaging outside, the grandstanding, the elbow twisting, all of that went on. It went on for 16 long days and many, many months before that. So it is something that we can achieve. It tells us that the global community, when it sets its mind, can get there. And clearly the global community needs now, not just the G77 plus China, to negotiate a new financial reset for developing countries. It needs to take leadership and take us into the 21st century without fear of constant catastrophe hitting us as vulnerable communities, as countries with not enough resources, and a discussion on loss and damage that is not able to provide the funds that we need to recover and rebuild. Now, when the final deal, I want to just mention, was reached between all the blocs in the blue zone, it was early morning. The green zone was where all our country pavilions and civil society, development partners, the World Bank and the UN pavilions operated for 14 days to bring powerful advocacy to bear on the negotiations. The Pakistan pavilion had the privilege of hosting the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister along with the UN Secretary General to take us through the 2 weeks of further constant, relentless advocacy. Again, I thank Rafi Alam and all our team at the Climate Ministry for that. As it stands, finally, ladies and gentlemen, loss and damage is at the core of our discussions as we enter a dangerous era of unpredictable climate risks to our people, our country, and our economy. The video you just saw telegraphed a tiny fraction of the scale and magnitude of the human suffering that non-traditional threats can bring to the ground with little warning. Once again, we thank the Secretary General for his powerful championing of Pakistan's case for climate justice, which he did repeatedly by coming here to the heart, making the heart to the journey of the ground zero, as well as the Egyptian presidency of the COP for delivering on the implementation COP that they promised. I thank my own Prime Minister for support constantly, and our exhausted teams, as well as all those negotiators who joined here. For special mention, I want to add Mariam Aurangzeb, who was on the phone with us, and Ambassador Nabil Munir. He is our ambassador in South Korea, but he joined us for a relentless round of very able steering of the group of 77 plus China. We worked together through many nights, and I think we came away with what was a story of hope and, well, a long journey ahead of us. Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen, will continue to keep 1.5 alive as we commit to our mitigation targets and also to seek a national adaptation plan as a core commitment to local climate resilience. The only real lag will be climate financing, as you all know. For that, we will continue our work. Winter is already here. Do not leave us alone to suffer its growing climate storms. Thank you very much.